Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and all distinguished participants. It is a great honor for me to be here in this highly esteemed forum today to deliver a keynote speech by sharing a few thoughts aimed at highlighting the current developments, current situations that we are facing, and the trend of developments, as well as to oversee in general what possible future directions of our urban planning and design. Let me now start with my presentations. But before that, I would like also to congratulate the Department of Architecture and Planning, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Gadjah Mada, especially the organizing committee, for the excellent arrangements of this conference, especially that it has to be conducted during a difficult time due to COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to start my presentations, but then I will have to start with an outline, although it is not necessary for me. The deliberation have to follow in sequence due to the complexity of the issue actually that we want to discuss today. In line with the theme of the conference, which focuses the design, planning, and innovations, I would like to underline that most of us are living in urban environment. We live in an age of cities which are superimposed by various layers and elements on domains. It has been predicted that by the end of this century, it is likely that most of the world's populations will be living in cities and even metropolitans, as urbanizations and globalizations become the widely accepted norm, and as the consequence, our past and valuable rural life has been gradually diminishing. We are living in cities with such a complex system which are shaped by various physical elements and life forces and are ever transforming in almost all dimensions, not only physically, but also economically, socioculturally, as well as in the meantime, the processes of which to some extent have also been influenced by some political interests. As Michael Petty, on his seminal entitled The New Science of Cities, he mentioned that cities do not exist in benign environments and cannot be easily closed off from the wider world. In addition, they do not automatically return to equilibrium, for they are forever changing. Indeed, they are always far from equilibrium. Nor are they centrally ordered, but evolve mainly from the bottom up as the products of millions of individual and group decisions, with only occasional top-down centralized actions. In short, cities are more likely to be biological than mechanical systems. End of quote. This idea has led to the shift of the general principles of design and planning from physicalisms, which is mainly concerned with geometry, morphology, and urban form, towards system approach, which is based on the idea of organized entities that are composed of elements or objects and interactions among them. To continue briefly from Michael Petty's brief explanations on physicalisms, he mentioned, start of quote, public responses to the conditions of cities before the industrial revolutions were particularly muted with respect to social concerns. grand plans in which parts of the city were laid out geometrically in monumental style and implemented by the that have existed since prehistory, but it was not until the mass migrations from the countryside to fuel the growth of the industrial city, where modern technological innovations were being developed and applied, that public responses to, to the obvious evils of overcrowding became vocal and significant. This was a response to high densities and all the attendant consequences in terms of health and overcrowding. End of quote. Indeed, some of the urban planning and urban design endeavors remain emphasized more on the physical aspects rather than on the social aspects that actually play important roles behind the scenes. An example is the presence of poverty issues and informal sectors in urban areas as detected through slums or squatter settlements, which are commonly neglected up to this moment. Urbanization has destroyed as much as it has built. The solutions lies in developing sustainable methods when dealing with slum dwellers, preserving their traditions of the village and the communities that have lived there for generations. Neither the housing nor forced evictions provide a true solution so far. In fact, yet it must be regarded as an essential element of the system that cannot be separated from urban life and for which more in-depth investigations are still necessary. Undoubtedly, urbanizations will continue to proceed, even bringing more severe impacts on the spatial dimensions of urban areas and regions. And various approaches have been developed according to the growing issues. Many publications have been made offering choices of concepts, which anyway have to be adapted with the local characteristics of the city or the regions. However, what I would like to emphasize during my presentations today are on four key concepts most relevant to mention with regard to future urbanizations in Indonesia, the discussion of which will be interrelated one to each other. The first point is smartness, which is associated with technological sophistications and digital connectivity. Secondly, sustainability, meaning development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. The third one is inclusivity, meaning a concern with equity by the provision of opportunities for all, involving multiple spatial, social, and economic factors. And the last one would be resilience, which is measured by the ability to absorb, recover, and prepare for future shocks, which can be economic, environmental, social, as well as institutional stresses. The further advancement of information technology that started in around the year 20, more specifically through the Internet of Things or IoT, which is popularly known as the development of Industry 4.0 as the continuations of previous stages of industrial development 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0 has led to the growing interest for smarter, safer, and more sustainable cities that are responsive to their citizens. While smart city solutions customarily focus on digital optimizations to existing urban infrastructure, this program goes beyond optimizations, in fact. It explores ways in which disruptive technology can significantly enhance planning, design, and management of contemporary cities, aimed for more resilient future. In addition, cities' underlying infrastructure layers can be managed and optimized and help to achieve a more efficient services provided to the people. However, some criticisms have also been addressed due to some reasons, such as confidentiality of the data, the risk of only being available to a small group of people. It promotes a technocratic approach to city planning and governance, as well as possibility of creating hackable urban systems. The specific questions raised with regard to the development of urban area is then, how significantly has the proliferations of the internet impacted society and the future shape of urban space? The answer that comes to our mind is that the internet has changed everything, including how we communicate, how we work, how we make decisions, and even how people way of thinking. If, however, the internet really has become such a key communications and informations infrastructure governing our social lives, then internet use suddenly becomes a precondition for participations in today's society. That is a new dividing line between social successes and exclusions. People who are digitally illiterate due to lack of access to the internet network or the inability to use gadgets will experience a digital isolation, even digital poverty, which can separate them from the digitally literate group. Uneven development of infrastructure can cause digital divide and further regional disparities. Distinguished conference participants, regardless of how sophisticated and widely spread use of Internet of Things, especially through the development of smart cities and smart regions, allow me to mention just another example how modern day information technology have also some unintended impacts in the life of our communities, particularly the children. Being introduced to digital world, especially through online games, movie watching, hanging around with social media applications, etc. They now tend to live in their own world and be more individualist and doing less social interactions with their friends, as well as do nothing with physical works. In fact, such conditions is dilemmatic, which need to have proper directions and control of the parents in order to avoid any further negative impacts. Within the context of inclusivity, besides the demographic bonus gained by Indonesia, which can be a real bonus if the younger generations are able to get decent education and facilities to improve their self-quality, there are also quite significant number of children between 0 to 17 years of age, the amount of which is almost 1/3 of the total populations of Indonesia. This means that we have to prepare these generations with decent education and livable urban environments, because the future of our country lies on their hands. However, a question is also raised. Have we provided them with necessary facilities based on the rights of the children as articulated in the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, which was launched in 1990? This convention is known as the most ratified by state parties among all UN conventions, which reflects the strength of the global commitments. The rights include access to health services, education, family life, play and recreations, an adequate standard of living, and to be protected from abuse and harm. In response to the convention of UNICEF, UNICEF has launched a program known as the Child Friendly City, which aims to promote the development of cities, towns, communities, or any systems of local governance to be committed to improving the lives of the children within their jurisdictions by realizing their rights. Few examples of Indonesian cities that have conformed with the criteria set by CFC, such as Surakarta, Surabaya, and Jakarta. But it should be noted that all endeavors must be based on inclusivity principle, meaning that facilities and services provided for children have also be accessible for all. Nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, we now have been blessed by the advanced informations and communication technology for our daily life and work. Can we imagine if virtual communication supported by the advance of digital technology has not been made possible at this difficult yet challenging pandemic situations? Allow me to try to answer these questions through the following explanations. Some of us have probably followed the global news that the declining interest in shopping at brick-and-mortar stores and the exponential growth in online sales was well-known phenomenon even prior to COVID-19. Many commercial sites were being reimagined as vibrant mixed-use spaces. Could recent events hasten this? And how might office development or other commercial facilities be affected? A sector which was already trending to intensified workspaces, such as hotel space and workstations replacing offices and cubicles, is being worked from home as not just a reality, but for many, that is a great preference. As a consequence, we, planners and urban designers, need to be more innovative in responding to the demand for specific urban spaces. Let me also explain it through another simple illustrations. In the Western culture, or countries with 4 seasons, going to a park is an important part of their life, especially during spring or summer. But for us who live in tropical areas, only very few of us may be interested to enjoy the hot day in the park. This situation has been affected by many factors, of course. However, as we witness nowadays, due to COVID-19 pandemic, there are higher preferences for open spaces, especially for recreations, rather than visiting shopping malls equipped with air conditions, which are prone to be an ideal space for viral transmissions. Meanwhile, Shopping facilities in most European countries, such as in the Netherlands, are mostly in the form of row of buildings connected directly by open street networks, which indeed are more resilient than those of enclosed shopping malls. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have to touch upon the issue of sustainability within the context of urban development. So far, sustainability is mostly discussed with regard to economic and environmental viewpoints. The rapid pace of industrializations, especially in countries with developing economies, within almost the last 3 decades, allow for increasingly sustainable developments. Urban developments can be described as the process of human expansion into natural and unsettled areas, especially as a result of an increase in local population density. In more industrialized countries, urban development rates are constant, if not declining, due to consistent settlement and housing patterns, as well as their relatively stable populations and already high levels of infrastructural development. On the other sides, the developing countries are now in the process of industrializing and urbanizing, so they are just the beginning to face the additional challenge of making their developments sustainable for a longer term. Moreover, since most developing countries are now also faced with the pressures of global capitalist system, it is important to note that they have the challenges to promoting urban and sustainable developments in order to prevent them from possibility of encountering stumbling blocks in the form of environmental problem and exhaustion of natural resources. In more specific issues, the more intense use of new and renewable source of energies has been more popular approach as part of the attempts to achieve sustainable development from the environmental point of view and also from the economic point of view. At the global level, all countries are now have the challenge to meet the SDGs targeted to be accomplished in 2030. It is a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all, ideally, which is meant to address the global challenges, including poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradations, peace, and justice. In short, the program is aimed at promoting prosperity while protecting the planet. However, each country has its own issues and problems, seeking for best and effective solutions. Again, especially due to COVID-19, which to some extent may impede the achievements of the goals up to this stage. Looking at sustainability from different spectacles. Nonetheless, as a matter of fact, socio-cultural values can also be a crucial part of sustainability. In this context, what I would like to underline is that it is necessary to make a bold notion on the importance of conservation of our historical values as well as our natural significance. It is necessary for us for not to see that conservation and development as a dichotomy. Instead, we have to see both as two sides of a coin. As early as the 90s, Mohammed Argun argued that conservation should be viewed as a developmental issue. Conservation cannot stand alone without institutional, financial, and other supporting resources, while development in this case should be directed towards maintaining the peculiarity of the object, including its social and cultural dimensions. This underlines the notions that there should be a balance between the development of urban spaces towards fulfilling the growing demand for space and the conservation of our cultural and natural heritage. For Indonesia, this is very important due to our richness of historical past, both tangibles and intangibles, and also the dynamic of urban developments. Without the great commitments of all stakeholders, the integrations of both cannot be accomplished. At the global level, a whole lot of conventions have been made by UNESCO and ratified by many state parties, which again, this fact reflects the vigorous global commitment for conservation aimed for supporting a global peace. I think we all agree that to get the inscriptions from UNESCO for our heritage assets should not be considered as the ultimate goal. Rather, the inscriptions have to be taken as a tool for reminding us to continuously maintain the conservation status, especially to guarantee the outstanding universal values of them. A number of inscriptions have been obtained by Indonesia. However, the big challenge for us is also to maintain them. Unfortunately, few of them have been put in the list in danger by UNESCO, such as the tropical rainforest heritage of Sumatra, which due to some threats posed by poaching, illegal loggings, agricultural encroachments, and plans to build roads through the sites. This is just an example to illustrate how conservation and development have to be conducted in a more integrated manner. Ladies and gentlemen, it will be quite interesting to briefly mention the current issue of building the new capital city of Indonesia to East Kalimantan. Regardless of the overburdened Jakarta as the present capital city, this general idea to move the capital city is relatively fine. But what I would like to highlight here is that it will be done not starting from a scratch. There live local communities, including trans-migrants who have lived there for generations. It will not be a simple way of ignoring and excluding them from the proposed system, both in the planning process and when the plan will be implemented. Evictions or relocations undoubtedly will not be the best solution for the sake of inclusivity. It is urgently necessary to carefully identify their potentials and their problems to adapt with the proposed systems in order to set up decent policies with regard to the positions of local communities within the new environmental settings. Importantly, lessons from the development of Jakarta as a capital city should be taken into considerations. It is also understandable that comments from global communities have been raised with regard to environmental issues due to the new development that will take place in one of the world's few rainforests, which is considered as the Earth's lungs. In this sense, environmental sustainability can be a major issue, even though a sophisticated approach will be proposed to take care of it. Anyway, this case might be the issue that best to be discussed through the four key concepts, which is smartness, sustainability, inclusivity, and resilience. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to return an issue related to resilience with a specific regard to current pandemic situations. I think we all agree that our urban life and physical forms of our living environment. Earlier, I pointed out that is ever transforming or undergoing dynamic changes, which we commonly explain as facing a number of shocks and stressors that in turn demand for resilience. In order to respond to that, various ideas and concepts have been developed to cope with the issue of resilience, which are mostly related to natural disasters such as floods, typhoons, earthquakes, or also to social unrest, which can also be from terrorism. In fact, urban resilience is strongly associated with the pandemic situations like what we have experienced today. However, the spread of COVID-19 was not clearly predicted at the beginning, and even people were still unsure that it would become much worse when the outbreak initially took place in Wuhan in February 2020. Shockingly, indeed, it becomes a pandemic that spreads rapidly throughout the world, while in fact that almost 90% of all cases and epicenters of the pandemic across the countries are in cities. Nonetheless, population density does not always correlate with the high incidence of the pandemic. Rather, poverty and deprivation, poor planning, inadequate infrastructure, and most importantly, the low awareness of the community on the importance of health protocols. Within the context of urban space developments, what is to become of our urban environments post-COVID-19? Public spaces with general indicator of success that the more people visit the place and conduct activities there, the more lively it is. It seems to be inappropriate nowadays. Rather, spaces that have to be planned, designed, and managed considering that overcrowding tend to make it difficult to follow recommended measures such as social distancing, physical distancing, and self-isolations like this. The second one is urban density, which has been the major concern of urban developments, especially for city centers or CBDs, for the sake of spatial and land efficiency. Will also be an important point to be revisited, in which the emphasis on strictly distinguishing between capacity and carrying capacity. I could not find any better illustrations than this in order to explain the difference between capacity on the left side and carrying capacity on the right side. Thirdly, in regard to urban public transport, the better services of which are normally provided in order to combat urban problems, particularly traffic congestions, air pollutions, and inefficiencies. But now the number of passengers have to be limited, which of course will not exactly meet at least one of the above principles. And lastly, overall, now considering the realities of COVID-19, including physical distancing, closure of public spaces, limiting social interactions, and restricting access to public businesses, is a nutshell that antithesis of the policy context that has underscored planning and development decision-making for over 20 years. In brief, since COVID-19 pandemic tend to change almost everything of our life, a long list of lessons will probably be made and demand for creative solutions. At least in general, we all agree that a contingency plan is always necessary in order to prepare our cities and region to become more resilient to whatever bad situation that might happen in the future. Distinguished participants of the conference, just to wrap up my talk, please allow me to draw a special attention to our positions at a specific region, the Asia Pacific, the trend that the Asian and Pacific region became majority urban in 2019, which is the first time in the human history. Let me also to conclude my talk today by recalling upon an important notions delivered by Professor Kishore Mahbubani, a Singaporean philosopher, former diplomat and academician, on his keynote address at the Symposium of Social Science, Rethinking the Social World in the 21st Century. A few weeks ago, he has warned us that the world is entering a global Asian new order, and he has called on researchers in the Asia-Pacific region to shed Western dominance of the social sciences. He mentioned that a shift of power to Asia is taking place, and the 21st century will be the century of Asia. We need to be very clear about that, and there is absolutely no doubt. That's what he said. This means that it is now the time and the challenge for all of us to develop new concepts and even new theories based on our own situations. Since Western theories, most of which will probably most likely no more appropriate and applicable to our situations. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's about it that I can share for today. I do hope that all of the materials that I present today can bring few further inspirations for all of us to set up our next steps for both planning practices and for scientific research, as well as for the development of our body of knowledge in urban planning and urban design.